Here in the United States, we find ourselves witnessing tragedies involving gun violence on a regular basis. Each time this arises, many outspoken voices appear from various media sources with their solutions, whether those voices blame gun legislation or violent video games. Recently, another of these tragedies took place at a video game competition in Florida. Like always, when mass shootings occur in the United States, and the shooter is a relatively young individual, political leaders tend to turn their attention away from discussing gun legislation to video games, with the premise that violent video games lead to violent behavior, such as a mass shooting. So today, on Brief Brain Facts, we're discussing how video games may influence the brain, and also if there's enough evidence to support the claim that violent video games lead to violent behavior. In 2016, the video game industry worldwide generated about $91 billion, and video games are available on PC, console, and even your phone, which has allowed more and more people access to video games. With more people playing games, how concerned should we be about the effects these games have on people? In relation to the brain and cognitive abilities, the effects video games have on people look positively promising. Researchers have discovered some really interesting things about playing video games and the brain. As an example, one study, after 2 months of playing a popular Mario game, demonstrated a growth in cortical areas responsible for fine motor control and navigational abilities. These areas include the cerebellum, the right hippocampus, and the prefrontal cortex. In another fascinating study, researchers used an elderly population and found measurable real-world effects of playing a video game and improving mental abilities, such as attention and working memory, which is the cognitive system responsible for maintaining a certain amount of information for a brief period of time. These findings have particular implications for older people to potentially help stave off mental decline. Further, some video games have been shown to improve motor skills and visual abilities. Most importantly, the brain and body benefits of playing certain video games is at the beginning stages of research, but the results look promising. Now, let's address the elephant in the room: violent behavior in playing violent video games. After all, consume any mainstream news, and you'll be able to find someone accusing video games of causing addiction and/or violence. So that must check out, right? Well, not so fast. After 30 years of research, the results tying video games to violent behavior remain inconclusive, or more precisely, there's some evidence supporting the premise that video games may lead to violent behavior, but there's actually more evidence that violence and video games are not related. Part of the problem lies in the fact that for a long period of time, young men consumed more violent video games, and according to The Economist, globally, the people who fought in wars or commit violent crimes are nearly all young men. So, some results showing a correlation between violence and video games has a problem: the chicken or egg phenomenon, in which we cannot determine if playing a violent video game results in violent behavior, or if people prone to violence are more likely to play violent video games. This doesn't necessarily mean that there is absolutely no association between violence and video games. In fact, in 2015, the American Psychological Association, or the APA, reviewed hundreds of studies between 2003 and 2013. They found a consistent relationship between playing violent video games and aggression. They also concluded that there is a combination of risk factors, and that video games alone could not entirely account for the appearance of aggressive behavior. However, a community of researchers have called the APA out on these claims, as the studies the APA used were not subjected to peer reviews, which means that no other scientists outside of the original researchers were able to double-check the test results. In addition, many researchers admit to short-term residual effects, meaning that playing violent video games may temporarily be related to violent behavior, but that there is no evidence to support a relationship between crime and actual violent behavior following long-term exposure to violent video games. Over 200 academic researchers who focus on the association between video games and violence submitted an open letter to the APA, countering some of the study's implications. They mentioned that as video game usage only continues to rise, violence committed by youth is at a 40-year low. It doesn't make much sense to attribute violent behavior to video games, especially when video game play increases, yet we're seeing a substantial decrease in violence committed by the same age group. The debate on whether violent video games lead to violent behaviors is not entirely settled. However, it appears that no research has been capable of making a causal link between playing violent video games and displaying violent behavior. Researchers suggest that if you're concerned about violence portrayed in video games, make sure that the video games are age appropriate. All in all, video games may have a physiological and psychological benefit. While many people worry that violent video games cause violent behavior, there are far too many outside factors, such as influences in our culture, to make this conclusion. So the next time someone tells you that a violent video game caused a back-talking teenager, a bad attitude young adult, or something far more serious. Remind them that there is no scientific evidence supporting this that has been embraced by the scientific community as a whole. Do you feel that you've ever benefited from playing video games? If so, comment below. If you liked what you saw, please subscribe to our channel and make sure to hit that like button. As always, thank you for watching.